Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Joel.
I'm Brooke.
And our intro question today.
Coming out swinging.
I heard this a few weeks ago, and I was like, we need to talk about this on the podcast. If you could have two different unlimited liquids come out of your pinkies on command, what two liquids would you choose?
First, you heard this question the other day? What dark corners of the internet are you living on?
At student camp.
Okay, at student camp. Okay, that makes sense for high schoolers. All right.
Yep.
For me, I was going to say Alani Nu on one.
Okay.
I don't know what those were and what that means.
It's an energy
We need to
drink.
do that as a test drink sometime.
Okay.
Some Alani's or something.
Yeah,
Alani's.
it's so good, so good. Oh, so Alani in one and espresso in the other, so I can just be making myself little lattes
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
all day long.
Yeah, halfway for me because I was just thinking about sort of the most common things that I drink, and I'm like, well, probably some kind of iced latte, some kind of espresso thing going on, strong coffee, maybe with some milk in there. So like an iced latte from Starbucks kind of thing, and then probably Coke Zero. So just load me up. That's sort of what's going on. And then as I'm saying this, I'm like, my wife's going to hear this and be like, you need to drink more water. You should make water one of these. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right, babe.
I was surprised so many of the high school kids when we were at camp said water. I'm like, that's the least creative thing you could tell me. Give me something exciting.
But it's the cool thing to do. If you have a cool water bottle,
Yeah.
then I guess that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, mine, ice cold Dr. Pepper. And I think gasoline. Like, that's
Whoa!
You can fill up your car for free.
I went
all the
liquids.
time.
I went straight for drinking
yeah.
and
Ew.
gasoline. That's a game changer.
Think
right
about
there.
how long it would take to fill up your tank, though, if it was just
I know,
your
just stay there with your pinky for a few hours.
But it's free. It's wild.
I frequently forget to fill up, so that would be so helpful for me because most of the time I'm checking, I'm like, okay, the car says I have 2 more miles. Gas station's
my gosh.
2.1 miles. Can I make it?
My anxiety is through the roof thinking about that.
Yeah, Lucas doesn't love it, but our first topic today, it's a Relevant magazine article titled "A Christian's Response to Mel Robbins' Viral Let Them Theory." Mel Robbins, a motivational speaker and podcast host, suggests that instead of trying to control how others behave or show up in your life, you should just let them. If someone doesn't support you, let them. If someone misunderstands you, let them. If someone doesn't want to be in your life, let them. It's boundary setting repackaged as emotional freedom. The let them philosophy, in its most distilled form, seems to subtly replace grace with indifference, wisdom with detachment, and love with ego preservation. The let them approach sounds good, but it can easily become a permission slip to disengage. You stop inviting people into hard conversations. You stop making the uncomfortable phone call. You stop caring because it's easier. Love, real biblical love, is long-suffering. It doesn't keep score. It keeps showing up. That doesn't mean you let people abuse you or cross every boundary, but it does mean that when you create distance, it should be guided by discernment, not detachment. So maybe we don't need a theory that tells us to let people go so easily. Maybe we need a savior who shows us how to stay tender, stay honest, stay open. One who teaches us how to walk away when we must, but to never stop loving, even from far away. I love this article. Joel, you sent it to me last week. Why did this stick out to you?
Yeah, I'd seen this clip shared a ton, and I'd seen this thinking of the let them theory be passed around a ton, and I thought the article distilled it very well to talk about it. It's the idea of boundary setting, but it's repackaged as emotional freedom. And there's two things, on their face value that are good. Emotional freedom is good. Boundary setting is healthy, and it's a really beautiful practice. But I just really connected with the article because it talked about the reality of how this turns more into indifference than actual love. And if it's just emotional freedom for us, it becomes very self-serving, which pulls us away from the way that we're called to live and be in the way of Jesus specifically. So I just connected with it because I think one of the things that's going around now, we talked about this a few episodes ago, is counseling or mental health speak that's sort of just being thrown around a lot. And the idea of boundaries is beautiful. Emotional freedom is incredible and so healthy. But this is just thrown around in a way that I think it misses the mark on really what love looks like, which is about patience and engaging, even if there's hurt and there's pain, to have discernment, not detachment. I just connected with in that way, for sure.
Yeah.
I think on the surface, it seems good.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
yeah, for sure.
You can't control them, so
yeah. And I think it's fine, like, oh, you don't like my outfit, or you don't like how I'm doing my hair. Like, let them think that. That's fine. But then when you kind of get down a little deeper and you're letting people walk away or walk out of your life or shutting them out of their life because they don't agree with you or whatnot, then, that's kind of where it can get messy, especially as a Jesus follower.
Yeah, it's interesting just because, like, just this last Sunday, in the message that I gave in the series that we started, we talked about how Jesus interacted with people that were assumed to be his enemies, and how Jesus didn't do the attack method of just like putting them down, putting them in their place, belittling them, but he also didn't do the avoidance method either of being like, well, I'll stay far away from them. The way of Jesus is about engagement, and it's about finding ways to build bridges. And in the let them method, if we carry it out to its logical conclusion beyond just what we wear or what they think about our music or anything like that, it can lead us to just silo ourselves from people that are different from us, silo ourselves from people where we have had little disagreements that become mountains instead of molehills, when I think part of what unity is not uniformity, but it's learning how to have difference and still walk with each other inside of that. So all that being said, this is not in lieu of having boundaries. And if there's been trauma and hurt, and you don't feel emotional safety around somebody, I'm not saying that you need to go and have lunch with them every day and become their best friend or become a doormat. I just think that the logical conclusions of the let them method end up being incongruent or in contrast with the way of Jesus that is more about engagement and friendship and attaching and not detaching in that way. Mm-hmm. How did you read it, Abby?
I think kind of like what Brooke was saying. Like, at first I was like, why would this be a bad thing? Like, you can't control other people. Why would you waste emotional effort trying to even if you don't come to them saying, what you said bothered me or anything like that, just keeping that inside yourself can really hurt. But I like the way that the author looked at this and was talking about how, the detachment part of it is where it gets kind of messy. Like, you should continue loving people. You should continue trying to keep those relationships, maybe even from a distance, but, keeping that moving forward. Yeah. Yeah.
And when I think, and you alluded to this, and I think the author of the article alluded to this as well, but when you just sort of stuff it down and just say, let them, and you don't actually diffuse your hurt, which is something you can diffuse through talking or relationship or prayer or being honest with somebody about how you feel, it actually doesn't go anywhere, and you carry around that emotional baggage that might come out at your spouse or a coworker when it's actually something about somebody else. And I think God wants us to bring those emotions to the surface and deal with them so they don't bleed out on other people or in other relationships or environments. And I think it's just really important too to know that you can love someone from a distance, right? And actually I think that's some of the most healthy thing that we can do. To love someone from a distance is not just to completely detach or cancel somebody. It's wanting good for them, finding ways for warmth in your heart for them, even though you don't let them into your life the same way.
Yeah.
And I think that adds some gray and some complications, so we just refuse to do it. We think that we'll just cut them out, and that is what does it. But I think cutting people out, it actually leaves this residue on our hearts and our souls that actually weighs us down. And I think ultimately, overall, when you get to the deeper levels of what the let them theory does, I think it might not heal us the way that we really need to be healed. And it might lead us with more baggage emotionally and even spiritually than we know, because we're not diffusing our hurt and our anger and our emotions.
Yeah.
Right.
So we've said, we should continue loving people, but that is so much easier said than done. How have you kind of worked on doing that in your own life?
And I'm not coming at this from an expert in any way, shape, or form. This is more art than science for me. For me, it might sound Christian cliche, but it begins with honestly praying for that person and asking God to bring good into their life, and not pray mean things like curses, but pray that they would have success, or that their kids would have a good day, or that that they experienced God's love today in a fresh way. There's something like, it's impossible in me to like sincerely go before God and pray for good for somebody and then have the same level of heat and anger towards them, because something about going before God and just talking to him humbles me, and it takes the pride out of my prayers. And because I realize that I'm a sinner saved by grace, and I'm a work in progress just like everybody else is. And if I'm wanting good for them, it changes. So for me, it really begins with how I dialogue with God, and that's not like a concentrated, here's my 30 minutes praying for my enemies, but it's just a part of what I'm thinking about and what I'm having in the front of my mind. So it begins there, and for me, I think everything else flows from that, because then if I see their post on social media, I'm not coming with as much vitriol or about them, because I had just talked to my merciful Heavenly Father to me about this person as well. So it flows out of that. And then there have been times too where I will, as a discipline, like write a quick note or a message or something like that, just something that is encouraging, or to say, like, comment on something, to be like, that's so awesome. I mean, like, to actually be moving towards them with positive energy. And especially if it's like a digital comment or an email, it's not like they're into my life the exact same way. But it's a way that I can pour good favor towards them and not anger.
Yeah.
And so that's helpful for me.
In a way, psychologically, it's kind of like affirmations, where when you start speaking good into these people's lives, it might change your view of them a little bit, and change the way that you think about them and the way that you talk about them. Yeah,
1,000%. I think that is psychology's way of catching up with the way of Jesus in a lot of ways too. Like, like when you are like thinking about and focusing on the positive and on the good and blessing, you actually have them transformed in your mind, and therefore you're actually transformed on the inside out too.
Yeah. I kind of the same for me. I just think, like, questioning myself, like, have I prayed for them? Have I prayed about this? Have I prayed about how I'm feeling about them? Am I avoiding them or having this feeling because of my own pride or bitterness? And just kind of trying to shift my own mindset too, I think can be really helpful in those situations. So
yeah. Well, our second topic today, it's a verywellmind.com article titled 6 Benefits of Friendships and Why It's So Important to Stay Close. It's never been more important to invest extra energy into our friendships. Friendship is just as important to our psychological well-being. Friends encourage healthy behaviors. Your friends can help you set and maintain goals. They can also watch out for you and give a heads up when any unhealthy behaviors get out of hand. Friends push you to be your best. Have you ever heard some version of the phrase, you're the average of the people you spend your time with? The people we're friends with have the power to influence our own values and character. Friends provide emotional support. If you find yourself going through a hard time, having a friend to help you through can make the transition easier. And friends can help you cultivate community. While we might all be pretty good at building online communities, our in-person ones are seriously lacking. When we invest the energy in our friendships and then encourage our friends to be friends with each other, it fosters a sense of community. The article has a few more in there that you can check out in our show notes. But what did you guys think about this? Did you agree with some of the points that the author made in this?
Yeah, I enjoyed the article. Something that honestly has been a little challenging for me up until the last couple of years, I feel like I've made some strides with, is that you hear, you're kind of the sum of or the average of the people that you're spending time with. So then as a Jesus follower, I'm like, okay, well, where do I need to draw the line with, I have several friends who aren't believers, or maybe aren't sure where they stand as far as, the whole Jesus thing goes. And that was really difficult for me. But now I've kind of changed my perspective, and like, it's been really incredible for me to actually kind of grow my faith by their questions, of my friends who aren't believers, by spending time with them. Like, they're not terrible people. They're still good people. They just might not believe in all the things I believe in. But that's really challenged me in like a really good and beautiful way, as far as like my faith goes, and being able to share that in an appropriate way. And so, yeah.
Yeah, to Brooke's point and the tension that she feels or felt about, hanging out with Christians and people that aren't Christians and wondering about the influence one or the other. I think that's a really natural tension to feel, and it's something that that it's good to talk about in a lot of ways too, because if we are, the average of the people that we hang out with the most, then what do we do, right? And it's really easy to get really insular and really insider focused, to be like, well, I'm only going to hang out with Christians. They're going to be the only people in my life because I don't want to be influenced by them in a negative way. It's really easy to get into that. And honestly, the longer that you're in church, sometimes church can pull you into that thinking. And I just think that we miss the mark inside of that so much when we feel like we insulate ourselves from outsiders or people that don't believe the same way that we do. I mean, to your point, Brooke, like, people are people, and people feel stress, and there are people that aren't Christians that have more experience parenting than I do and going through hard things in life than I've experienced yet, and I need them. One illustration I heard years ago, just to sort of help bring balance to that conversation, was like, if you think about, you have two chairs on each side of you. It's important for that, like, the closest chair to you on your right and your left, like, it's important for those people to be people that are running in the same direction that you are, the people that you're like are right there with you. It's really important because they are going to influence you at a higher rate, and you're going to go to them. So it's like important for them to be running in the same direction that you are, or to be people that are, Christ followers. But man, we better have people in those next chairs going farther away from us that are people that don't see the world the way that we do. Not only can we learn from them and grow from that, but how are they ever going to rub shoulders with the real thing? Or how are they going to ever come to hear Jesus or experience God's love through compassion or the way that we look out for them if we don't have them in our lives? And so I think it's important for all kinds of people to be our friends. And if you are a Christ follower and you can't think of a person who you are near and dear to, and they are to you, and you're in relationship with that aren't Jesus followers, man, I want to ask you to reconsider and open up your relational world for it, because it really is a both and situation.
I thought the article was great. I think we do need people more than ever. I think sometimes it's hard to have so many face-to-face connections because it's easy to get lost behind your phone screen or whatever on Facebook. But yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I think it was a really great reminder of the power and the necessity of healthy relationships, and how even in our digital time, and we're behind screens or avatars or whatever it might look like, how there's really no substitute for someone looking you in the whites of your eyes, knowing you, hearing your story, sharing their pain, you sharing their pain, and looking at somebody being like, oh, you feel that? Well, me too, and connecting with someone. It's just such a powerful thing. And I do feel post-COVID, it is interesting because, there's this loneliness epidemic in our culture, but at the same time, it feels like we have lost some of the muscles to go be with people. Like, we recognize we're lonely and we're too digital, too online, but we're like lacking the muscles to go hang out with people the way we were pre-COVID. Like, I remember hearing somebody at a conference a couple years ago that said that people are hanging out with friends 60% less than they were pre-COVID, now post-COVID. Just like we're not. And my wife and I, like, our rhythms are not the same as they were pre-COVID, and it's like we just lost some of that muscle that want to step into those types of relationships. But this article is such a reminder of just the necessity of it. And I mean, from a just strictly psychological standpoint, how much of a gift it is that we are running with people that are running in the direction that we want to run in, that can commiserate with us in our stress and our just daily life stuff and have support. I mean, it's just amazing in that way. And again, I feel like it's psychology's way of catching up with the way that God's designed us to live. I think I've shared this many times before, but it's interesting in the New Testament, all these letters that are written to these churches, every time that we in our English read the word you, it's actually plural. It should be y'all every single time in the entire New Testament, because it's written to groups of people. It's written to communities, not to individuals. And the more that we try to individualize our faith and we don't think about how it works in community and how our lives affect others and how their lives affect ours, we miss out, and we miss a part of how God's wired us to live and to walk in this world. So, so important, such a necessity, and it again just speaking for myself, I find it like a discipline almost to make that time and not be that person who gets home after a long, stressful day, or we get our kids down for bed and you just want to close the garage door and turn the lights off. I just feel that on my tension in that. So it's a challenge, but it's so well worth it when we open ourselves up to it.
Yeah.
Something that I think has been really good for my husband and I is our table group here
I was
at
going to say
church.
the same thing, yeah.
Because it's so easy after a long day, especially when you have kids and stuff, to just say, oh, I'm so tired, like I just want to stay at home and relax. But having it scheduled like once a week, we know we're going to meet with our group, and these people over the last couple of years have become our close friends. And not only are they holding us accountable for, goals and things that we have for our own lives, but like to just sometimes meet in the mess and be like, man, this week we've really been going through it, whether it be something we're going through at work or in our relationships with our kids. All of that has just been like so special to, not every week are we like, yeah, table group. But when you have to go and then you get there and you're like, man, that was so good.
And you never regret it afterwards,
Never
right?
regret it. Yeah.
No, for sure.
So on the topic of friends, what character from a TV show do you think you could be best friends with?
Oh, man. So many that I would like to be best friends with, and that I'd probably annoy them, actually. The very first person that comes to my mind would be Jim Halpert from The Office. I would love to just sit down and hang out with Jim, talk about sports, make the awkward little smirk at the camera kind of thing with Jim Halpert from The Office. If not that, not him, it would probably be Josh Lyman from The West Wing, my favorite TV show. He's one of my favorite characters, who my wife every now and again will be like, hey, you need to chill out. You're acting a little bit like Josh right now. And I'm like, oh, okay, babe. But just kind of passionate and always let you know how he feels about things that he cares about, kind of thing, as somebody who's working in a fictional White House. Yeah, that's my answer there.
How about you, Abby?
I think for me it would be a duo, Bob and Linda Belcher, because
From Bob's Burgers?
Yes, from Bob's Burgers.
Oh, man.
Linda's always finding crazy adventures to go on, and Bob kind of, can bring the tone down a little bit. Between the two of them, it would be great to hang out, go on adventures, do weird stuff, hang out with their kids, all that kind of stuff.
You just want to be animated like on Bob's Burgers, like the Belchers. Okay, I see.
Yep. What about you, Brooke?
It was an easy choice for me. Jessica Day from New Girl.
Oh, yep.
Who's that girl?
Jess.
Yeah.
You are a lot like Jessica Day.
There's some
Matt always tells me
bubbly
that.
connections there.
I think we would have a great time.
Yeah. No,
Together.
I love that. Okay, our final topic today. It's a Relevant magazine article titled What the Bible Actually Says About Gender Roles and What It Doesn't. The Bible's teachings on gender roles have been a source of much debate and discussion within Christian circles. While the Bible affirms the equal dignity and worth of men and women is equally created in God's image, it also speaks to some level of order and structure in the church and home. Passages like Ephesians 5 call for mutual submission and sacrificial love between husbands and wives, rather than rigid hierarchies. However, the Bible also includes examples of women in prominent leadership roles, such as Deborah, Huldah, and the women who were the first witnesses of Jesus' resurrection. The Apostle Paul's writings, which are often cited to restrict women's roles, are complex and require careful consideration of historical context. Overall, the Bible paints a picture that is less about strict gender roles and more about reflecting Christ through mutual service and the use of spiritual gifts, regardless of gender. So the author goes through and talks about several different passages in the article. You can read those in our show notes. But what did you think of the author's views on these different passages?
We just need like 6 hours to really do this justice. And I mean, for people that know me and know our church, like I hold to more of what's called an egalitarian theological bent, where, men and women have equal status, and if they have specific gifts, they should use those gifts as they were given, instead of what would be considered more of a complementarian theological bent, which says that men and women have their equal dignity but have different roles, which typically has men leading women and women being restricted leading in that role, trying to be generous in the way that I say that. And both, like, there's it's just complicated because both of them have their Bible verses, you know what I mean? And there are faithful Jesus followers who land in both of these camps. And it's like at the end of the day, I'm going to be worshiping in eternity with people that I disagree with about this. So this is not coming from any kind of like, I am enlightened and everybody else is not as evolved as I am. Like, that's not where it is. But like, I just can't, and I, you know, because I say everybody has the Bible verses. I get to like, because of that reality, I get to a very practical place where I'm just like, I think about the work of the local church and how hard it is and how beautiful it is. And I just practically can't imagine doing it without incredible women that I know that I get to serve alongside. I feel like I'd be fighting a battle with one hand tied behind my back. And I mean, you guys around this table and many other people that I get to serve with and serve alongside of on our teams, I just can't imagine it. And I see the fruit that comes from it, and I see the goodness that comes from it. And I'm just like, wow, I can't argue that. You have your Bible verses, I have mine, kind of thing. But I can't argue that, what God has done and is continuing to do through women. One of the things that that people point to, or I like to point to, is at Pentecost. You know, this is like day one, opening day of the church. Peter gets up and gives a speech because all of a sudden everybody's speaking in this different language and there's this weird, like, mysterious thing that's happening. But Peter gets up in his sermon and he quotes from the prophet Joel. No favoritism there, but he quotes from Joel, and Joel, you know, Joel said thousands of years earlier, your sons and daughters will prophesy, even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit. And then from there, man, I just see a story of men and women locking arms, using their differences, not saying that there's no differences between the men and women, but they both use their strengths and they carry each other, and we need each other in that way. So I'm drawn to the egalitarian view. I definitely think there's a strong theological case that I think the article does a pretty good job of pointing out. And we have to do some historical, cultural work to understand some of the backgrounds on some of the verses that are more challenging. But for me, it just lands in a very like practical place where I'm like, man, I can't imagine this without my sisters leading the way with me, not me leading them as much as leading the way with me. And so there's my cop-out answer for the podcast in that way. But yes, I agree with it. I think it's beautiful. I think it reverses what happens at the fall, at the very beginning. I think separating men and women actually, and making men over women, is actually a product of the fall, and Jesus reverses the fall, and there's a new day. Don't get me going. But I think it's really, really awesome. And again, I hold grace and hold these things open-handed for people that disagree with me. Try to.
I just really like that the author included, I put this little quote in here, Jesus doesn't erase gender distinctions, but he consistently elevates the role, dignity, and spiritual authority of women in a way that defied cultural expectations.
Every single time. It's almost like he was doing it on purpose to make a point.
Yep.
Yes, and I love that about Jesus. And honestly, I grew up in a faith tradition where this wasn't talked about and it wasn't elevated. And I felt like when I was discovering it, I was even more compelled by Jesus, seeing how punk rock he was and how like he was bucking the system, and especially the way that sisters were treated. And he said, no, these are my daughters and they're partners of mine. I mean, gosh, I could go forever. You guys know that like wealthy women were the ones that bankrolled Jesus' ministry. Like there are these like verses that are there in the Gospels of these women that came out of the woodwork who were probably wealthy women who would like fund his ministry to keep things going. It's all over the place, you guys, you know, and the very first witnesses to the resurrection who went and told the disciples about it were women. So I always joke with Allison and our teaching team. I'm like, if we were a really biblical church, you'd have to give the Easter message every single Sunday because women were the ones that announced the resurrection, right?
Yeah.
I love it.
So what would you say to someone who's adamantly against women leading in the church?
I love you. I don't see it this way. And I would say, how do you argue with the fruit? How do you argue with people coming to know Jesus? And how do you argue with, young girls in your church seeing women lead at all different levels, and then seeing them rise up to what God's calling them to do? How do you argue with the goodness that's coming out of it? That's probably where I would go.
Yeah.
I think addressing, like, I understand that there are passages that
on the
you
surface
are getting this from.
Yeah, they're not making it up.
Right,
That's true,
right.
yeah.
But I also just believe that those need to be read in the light of the cultural context and who it's being written to.
So true.
And yeah, I just think that we're all given gifts and talents. Those aren't necessarily given based on whether you're male or female, but more so kind of depend on your spiritual maturity and willing to listen and follow to where God's calling you. I wanted to share this too. Growing up, my grandparents always went to like really conservative churches, and plot twist, they've been coming here for the last couple of months. But something that I have witnessed with my papaw that's been really cool to see is, I remember when I was little, he was saying, not in a mean way, but he would just share like, women aren't meant to lead in the church, or women aren't meant to pastor a church. And then now I am seeing him coming here. And last week we had our friend Chelsea Radcliffe gave the message, or I guess that was 2 weeks ago. And my Papa really enjoyed that message and felt like he was able to see some scripture that he's, been reading for many, many years in a different light. And I think that's something really beautiful that can happen when women are, leading alongside men as well, is that like we are gonna be able to give a different perspective maybe than a male could. So
yes, definitely. And men need it. We
Yeah.
need the different perspective, and it'll be stronger together. That's really beautiful. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's it for this episode of Atypical Talk. If you have any topics you'd like us to talk about or questions, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Atypical Talk Pod. And make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to get updates when new episodes go live. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.